Yes, I live here all year long, which is a big adventure in Vermont to live here year round. Today is particularly beautiful. It has it was very cold and all the trees, all the branches are covered with snow, and it was a real winter wonderland today.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up on Martha's Vineyard, a small island off the coast of Massachusetts, close to Boston. Also rural in the summer. Martha's Vineyard's just very much rural Massachusetts, small town. It's surrounded by ocean, so, I always had a bikini in my car as a teenager. It's from 16 on. Vermont was never something that was really in my sights or awareness to move to, and Peter, my husband, slowly was convincing me to move to Vermont, taking me hiking and skiing and camping, and then we were looking for a place to build the camp that we run that we'll get into talking about, and it sort of clicked.
Being a college dropout stayed with me for a long, long time. Watching friends pass classes I failed felt humiliating. I never beat myself up about it, but I carried it with me. In my early 20s, I jumped from writing jobs to waiting tables. I worked to make money and to leave. I took the road trips my peers couldn't take while they were focused on internships and first jobs, opportunities I couldn't apply for because most required a school reference or a degree I simply didn't have. That gap between their structured idea of success and my unstructured freedom shaped me in ways I'm still discovering. Growing up with a sibling with a disability also shaped how I moved through the world. I will talk more in future episodes about the idea of the glass child, siblings who grow up slightly out of frame, often hyper-aware, responsible, emotionally stretched, which can affect focus, stability, and how you step into adulthood. I'm Léa Hirschfeld, and you're listening to Out of Sync, exploring life with disability, one story at a time. In this 5th episode, you will meet Isla, an occupational therapist and the co-founder of Zeno Mountain Farm, a camp in Vermont for people with and without disabilities. Zeno is a place where families and siblings can witness their loved ones being valued and loved outside the family, an experience that can deeply shape emotional stability and self-worth for everyone. In Isla's words, Zeno is where the micro, a camp in Vermont, meets the macro, our place in humanity. It's about friendship, inclusion, service, and shared growth, and about how real freedom doesn't come from money or travel. It comes from the mind and from the way we build connection. New episodes of Out of Sync drop every Tuesday on all platforms. Transcripts are on YouTube. French stories are on Décalé. And it's now
beautiful,
time to grab
beautiful
a cup of your
place and
favorite
has a
drink
beautiful
and
small
enjoy
community,
the story.
which those two kind of are inextricably linked. And we really wanted a place where the camp could feel rooted but independent and organically grow into this, a symbiotic relationship with this place. And part of the camp is coming to this place and being at this beautiful location. And so I do feel lucky to be here all year long, and I have a deep love for Vermont. It's made me tougher. It's made me appreciate things in a different way. And when we arrived, Zeno wasn't built, and that over the 14 years, we've just built it little by little with many hands, so many volunteers and families and students and work days, and kind of reflecting on that at 14 years is really something astounding.
Did you go to camps as a teenager?
I'm kind of a career camp person. Yeah, I used to win things for enthusiasm. That was the award I always got. On Martha's Vineyard, it's a big summer place, so I went to day camps and theater camps, and my parents always worked as well. The Vineyard is a real working class community, so in the summer, my parents had 10 jobs, and they normally had 2 or 3, and so I went to a lot of camps because of that, for childcare, and then I went to sleepaway camp around age 10, and love that, on a little lake in Lake Winnipesaukee, on a little island, another island in New Hampshire, so nearby, and went for a whole decade there. And my last year there, I was a counselor in training, and I drove the water ski boat and worked at the craft shop and played soccer, loved it. And then my very last year as a counselor there, my friend had gone to a camp on the vineyard that was for people with disabilities, a similar camp, and she was like, Isla, you are going to love this camp. You got to quit that camp. I know you love it, but you got to come volunteer next summer. And so I went that very next summer to volunteer. at a camp for people with disabilities on Martha's Vineyard that I had grown up with. I had been a girl in that town, and my mother's a nurse, so she had taken me to the plays that they do. And I had always kind of felt like, I'm going to do that when I'm older, or I'm drawn to that, or I'm interested, or
Do camps or work with people who have disabilities?
go to that particular camp with people with disabilities. Yeah, the plays that I would see once a summer were very, very dynamic. It was like very creative and so different than what I had seen, and very fun and joyful, and high quality of music and high quality of humor, things that I really loved. And I could just kind of sit there and let my expectations just kind of shift around me and open, and I could just be in the experience. So it was very like immersive as a child. And when I was 19, I went first to volunteer. And it was the year 2000, which is easy to remember because it has 000, which also is kind of auspicious. That is the year that I met my husband at the camp, and was the first time I volunteered at 19. And basically from that summer, that first summer, I started to orient my personal life and my career life around this camp and this community filled with people with disabilities and creative endeavors.
What's the name of this camp?
It's called Camp Jabberwocky on Martha's Vineyard. And it has an amazing story, too, very briefly. It was started in the 50s and by a speech pathologist who was a British woman who was very feisty and willing to kind of go outside the boundaries of what society kind of expects or thinks is appropriate, or, these are themes that we're continuing to see in this disability movement right along. But she took a few of her students with disabilities to her home in Martha's Vineyard for a summer vacation, 5 days. And she said, they deserve a vacation, and so do the parents. And so there's all these stories of they slept on the floor and ate beans and went to the beach and just went places they could walk and push the wheelchairs. But so that was in 1950. So very well ahead of any integration movement in the States. So that's where it started on the vineyard, and then still going today.
Did you study after that something that was in relationship to disability, or?
Yes, I think with my mom as a nurse, I was always very medically oriented, but I didn't want to be exactly what she was. So I didn't want to exactly be a nurse. And I actually was pretty interested in medical school, but I could not fathom the price of medical school as like a 17-year-old. It made no sense, and I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and so it felt very overwhelming. But I felt medically oriented since the beginning, and I really was like the only one of my friends who was like kind of ready to go to college and get a job, get into a field. So I studied occupational therapy, and I went to Boston University, where they have a great OT program, and have been in OT since I graduated in 2005. So I've had this kind of tandem career of a clinician in the clinical world, in the healthcare world. I've worked in many different settings with disability as an OT, acute hospitals, people with spinal cord injuries and brain injuries, up into, I spent the majority of my career in public schools and private schools, working with school-aged children with disabilities, and kind of a specialty in multiply impaired children with multiple disabilities. And honestly, the reason I got into the schools was because I wanted to have the summers off to run the camp and to go to the camp. It was simply a function of my passion for the camp and the balance that the camp brings, that the nonprofit model brings to the clinical world. I feel like it's been a wonderful tandem career because it's so complementary. The nonprofit model of belonging and service and reciprocal care and friendship was such a compliment to the clinical work I was doing as an OT. And I could really bring that in my skills and the therapy I did, but also sort of in my heart and that frequency that I carried as a clinician. And I kind of watched that grow over the years. I have been on a break from the clinical work since my third son. So for 5 years, I have not worked as an OT, but I've been working in the Vermont public schools since we moved for those 14 years.
What does one study to become an occupational therapist, and what does it mean to be an occupational therapist? What do you do?
To be an occupational therapist, you now need a doctorate, but I was the last year that got a bachelor's, so I saved myself and my parents many, many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, which was lucky. So it's a complementary career to physical therapy, very similar. People know physical therapist, which is a rehabilitation job where you work with people with disabilities or people that have had an accident or elders or children, really across the spectrum, to help them in their physical body get back to doing the things they want to do. That's what a physical therapist does.
With
And
exercises and with sports, or like, how does it?
yes, exercises and sports and training. Yes, physical therapy is very much the exercises and the sports. And occupational therapy is very similar, but instead of just working on the physical body, we're working on getting back to the what's important to the person's kind of humanity, to the person, what the person wants to do. And that starts with your activities of daily living. So we work in OT with people doing hygiene and dressing and brushing teeth and feeding themselves. Next step would be to cooking and independence around the house and your daily activities. And then right up, you follow that trail right up into what brings meaning to your life. What do you want to do that's going to bring the most meaning? If somebody wants to paint, so how can we set someone up, including their disabilities and their challenges, to paint? And can we, OTs really look at the setting where someone is? How can we change what's around them? They're more specialized in that than physical therapists. And then also, what can we do with exercises and to modify the body and the person to be more capable to paint? You know, can we set the easel up at an angle on a table with a stand that's firm? Can we work on your upper body strength? And then to add in assisted devices as well. What equipment would one need to be as independent as possible and to have as meaningful a life as possible? So it was really a fit because it's very individualized. What brings meaning to one person is so different than what brings meaning to another person, and that's why I was very drawn to OT. And it is a very creative career because it's people and it's disability and it's seeing what's possible. It's living in the potentials as I see it.
So you're really the person who is between the individual that you're helping and the system. What did you learn by being at that really specific key position?
Yes, yeah. It can be a hard position to be in because currently our society and our culture really has sort of a negative connotation about disability. When you acquire a disability, like you're in an accident and then you have a disability, or you're born with a disability, the connotation is sort of the first focus is what someone can't do, what the issues are, what they're going to miss out on, what they won't be able to achieve. That's just kind of the natural inclination. And in OT, what we're trying to say is we're trying to look at what someone can do and start with what's important and just take these little tiny steps. So at that juncture, I feel like I could just really meet people in a way that was collaborative. And we take all these classes in OT school about task analysis, which is kind of a cool metaphor for life, but you break things down into the smallest possible steps. And we had to write papers that broke things down into the smallest possible steps. I wrote a paper about erecting a tent, and it was like 20 pages long. And, I had to say erecting many times, so my friend and I were laughing about my erecting paper. But there's always a step you can take. That's very much where you meet people at when they're in the system. Families are dealing with a lot of loneliness and frustration. People also can feel shame or all types of things. So I've really felt like it was my job to greet them as a person and bring myself as a person and then take small steps together.
What situation have you dealt with the most with schools?
The public schools is a wonderful place to work because it's very varied. You get to see many, many types of disability. It's kind of like you have all the clients are very different. Some places you work, it's kind of specialized. So you're working with all people with brain injury or all people that have cerebral palsy or physical disabilities. So the schools is very wide range. I often felt like there wasn't enough services for people, that people didn't get enough OT support. And the model is very based around a deficit model. So in order for someone to get services at the schools, in order for me to come in as an OT to consult with the teachers and to create goals for independence and for success, they have to be scoring very, very low. They have to have so much deficit and be so far below their peers to access the support. So kind of fundamentally in a macro sense, I feel like the mode of access is the hardest part about schools, because when you're in this mindset of deficit, again, it can be a lonely, challenging place to feel like, okay, my child needs help with this, my child is this behind in this, and we need to have markers and we need to have information about that. It's all important, but it's a hard place to start to then build up into those potentials. And so that was my biggest challenge, kind of philosophically, was I just wanted to go to the meetings and say, I love working with this kid. I think this kid brings this, and this to the classroom. I think this and this is where we need to support. And I always felt like I really wanted to support the parents in that and support the teachers. I also really love working with teachers. That is a very inspiring part of the job, to make a small change and educate them about the potentials of the student or the challenges, and watch something come alive, watch the student be a little bit more independent at circle, or watch these small little keys start to unlock. But I wish that we could access all the students, and especially the students with disabilities, from a place of potential, from a place that, the OT is at the school for this many hours and they can work with any and everybody. And, if I was in charge of all the money and the federal funding, it could be a different access. It could be a different entry point. I think that is where it can feel hard. And then when we start to take the steps, we start to kind of integrate that. And then we can also just talk about that as a team, but you have to kind of get in there first before you can tend to that.
Do you start working with people at a very young age, or is it sometimes adults?
Yeah, I wanted to work with adults, actually. I've always been more interested in OT school. It's very common. Everyone wants to work in pediatrics. They'll say, like, where do you want to be in OT? And 85% of the people in my class said, I want to work in pediatrics. And I said, I'd love to work with adults. Again, I landed in pediatrics because of this summer schedule, to have the summer off. But yes, you can get OT starting, 0 to 3 is called early intervention here. And I never actually worked very much in early intervention. I do love that age. I love the 0 to 3, but I was really working with elementary aged kids, which is, 5 on up, and mostly lower end elementary, like 5 to 12. But also worked with some high school students, and enjoy really every age. Every age has its own cool things that are unfolding, and different challenges. And the younger kids, there's a lot of work with families, which I also really love. I love to work with families and be part of the team in that collaborative way. The family's such a big part of the care team.
Mm-hmm. When you start working with older kids or adolescents, you can also, I feel, notice what's been missing before. And we usually say that it's really important to start building at a very young age, or as young as we can. Have you worked with people where you thought, like, this could have started so much earlier and it would have made a great difference?
Yeah, well, I think you can again look to the career of working at the camps and also having the OT. You can see that in that career that I've had, that complementary career, and that some of the people that have been coming to the camps, a big part of the model is that people come back year after year. So I've known people with disabilities that have started coming around age 8, and then, he's now in his 30s, and so seeing what that model of friendship, and a model of I matter to a group and I'm important and I have a fun group of people to come see every single summer and be part of, how much that affects your life outside of camp, your life in school or your workplace. And I think adolescents that I've met and worked with that were outside of the camp, I think adolescents with disabilities are dealing with the similar things with adolescents without disabilities, neurotypical adolescents. It's a lot about belonging, right? It's a lot about, where do I fit and where can I feel my empowerment that's growing? And I do feel like the adolescents with disabilities have many, many more barriers to those fundamental things they're working on: friendship, belonging, independence, all these things that are fundamental. And people that have grown up in the camp model, I can feel their sense of value, of worth, has more of a rooted foundation, and that is so core to our humanity, and that is harder to find in the regular world, if you have a disability, and for many reasons, any reason that you have marginalized conditions in your life, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When did you decide to create your own camp?
We had been working at the camp on the vineyard as volunteers. And again, up into my life as a 19-year-old, it was the most dynamic thing I had done. It was the most fun and challenging and creative thing I had done. So I think as any young person, you start to follow what you feel magnetized to, right? And where you feel that creativity and friendship and challenge, So we started to do camps other than the vineyard camp. We went out to LA, we went down to Mexico. Anyone that was part of the summer camp that was doing something new would kind of rally the troops and say, "Hey, do you want to come? We want to go down to Mexico and start a group there." And anytime we started a new camp, we always had people with disabilities and people without disabilities going together, because part of the modeling is the friendships and the collaboration. And a lot of the care and a lot of the activities are guided by the people with disabilities, also teaching the people without disabilities, one, how to care for them, but also how to have activities be rich and have activities that meet everybody's needs. So it's very collaborative. So it's not like able-bodied people can just go down to Mexico and say, "Hey, let's have a camp for people with disabilities," because we're only bringing our perspective as able-bodied people. And so we would go, and we were all friends from these summer camps. So I would go with my friends with disabilities and my friends without disabilities, and we would be demonstrating the care we're providing, but also we would be integrating. And so that's how we started camps. And I went to LA. I helped do a camp out there. We had a friend in Mississippi. So this was happening, that we felt like the model was transferable, that the philosophy and the integration and the friendships was kind of the core principle that we could bring almost anywhere. And people with disabilities are natural problem solvers. I mean, so traveling was like a wonderful, fun adventure because there's many things to solve traveling. And I'll never forget when I took my friend Larry down to Guatemala. He was a small man with cerebral palsy, and he had a blue wheelchair. It was like a bright blue wheelchair. And we got off at the airport, and a woman, we were on like the United Airlines or something, and the woman thought that his wheelchair was the United Airlines like wheelchair that you can just borrow. So she put her child in his wheelchair and wheeled her child all the way through security. And so Larry had quadriplegia, so he had limited functional use of his limbs. So he could use his hands and his arms a little bit, but not in a functional use to walk. Or to hold many things. He actually had a cool communication system where he would touch his thumb to his pointer finger to say yes, and he would touch his thumb to his middle finger to say no. So that was very cool. Anyways, I could carry Larry, but not for very, very, very long distances, but I ended up carrying him all the way through the airport in search of his wheelchair that we only had one of, And he was just laughing, and I was laughing, and I was sweating and hoping that we would reunite with the wheelchair because, we were at the beginning of our journey. But there are always things to solve and figure out. And because people with disabilities exist in a world that is not set up for them, there is constant creative problem solving. Oh, sorry.
The way you put it feels like camp and having places where you can meet people year after year and build relationships that are outside of your everyday life feels very complementary to a life where obviously depends on people, but there can often be a lot of isolation and sometimes some difficulties with autonomy, whether it is physically or how to make friends, how to find a job, how to have something steady that also connects you to society, really.
Exactly.
And it's when you look at people who have intellectual disabilities, for example, it's often really challenging to have work environments or like school environments that are stimulating and that actually are environments that expect of you, like that challenge you beyond what you can naturally give. And I feel like what you're suggesting is camp is a place where you can actually try in a fun way, also in a friendly way.
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite parts about the camp philosophy that I think I was drawn to immediately and have been since the beginning is this core principle of service. When you have a group that's that diverse, as you mentioned, physical disabilities and intellectual disabilities, people that's a wide range of ages, that much diversity and that in a model of providing care, so a reciprocal care model, you're kind of, I always say, like, service is the currency of Zeno. Service is, we're in service all day long. And that's in small ways, that we do the dishes and sweep the bricks and clean our cabins and do the laundry together as a group, but also in a bigger sense, in that I bring what I can bring and you bring what you bring. And then let's see what we can create together. And it's not saying, I think often it's with people with disabilities, it's saying, we're going to meet your basic needs. A roof over your head and someone to help you get your food and get to the bathroom. But Zeno's going one more step. Camp is going one more step further to say, we need you here. We need your talents. We want your talents to be part of this. We want to bring you in with all of you, and we'll provide the care that we need and then see what we can create together. And that is a model, I think, that speaks to our core humanity, and people feel that, and people feel that belonging in an authentic way, like someone is counting on me, and I think people with disabilities are not expected to be of service to other people. I always think about my friend Ben, who he's a man with Down syndrome who also came as a young boy and now is in his 20s, I guess, upper 20s. But when he first arrived at camp at Zeno, he wanted to ride in the front seat of the vans. And because, one, the front seat's awesome, you're close to the music, you get to hang out with the driver, and he normally rides in the front seat most of the time at home, And I said, oh, Ben, well, we're going to need you to go a couple rows back because our friend Ron needs to get into the van. And Ron is a large man with a traumatic brain injury. I think he's like 6'2", and he uses a wheelchair. And so it's much easier for Ron to get into the front seat because there's a handle. And Ben was kind of like, what? You want me to go to the back? Like, I don't want to leave the radio. But then Ron wheels right up. And then that's a moment for Ben to kind of, as you're saying, have a new experience. And then two, put it in a context of service, because Ron's got to get in and he can see the people helping Ron. And he wants to go where the group's going, which is to get ice cream or the pond or something fun. So very quickly, Ben hops right to the back. And now Ben just goes right to the back every time and sits in like the farthest seat ever because he's ready to go. He wants to do the fun activity. So it's all these little tiny micro moments of service to each other and service to the group and service to something that's bigger than ourselves, which is, what we can create. And that starts to shift something deep inside people again. And I think it connects to our worth and to the belonging. And I think our programs we run programs all throughout the year, but it's a model where people come back year after year. So Ron and Ben come to the summer program and they come each summer. And that gives them a chance to build a shared history with their friends and build memories and build skills of independence and all of that. And I do know that for many people, having that one piece of the year that feels true to their humanity, that feels authentic to the friendships and what they can bring and their challenges. Ben sometimes gets stubborn and gets stuck and doesn't want to do a group activity and has to miss out. Again, we want to be careful not to sugarcoat anyone's experience or people's experience of disability. It's so diverse and there's many, many challenges and barriers, but to have one place to come that is this group of friends that you're building over time is enough to carry people to that next year, to tell their heart and to remind them that they are whole and that they have a place here on this big, wild planet where we live, which the micro place is the place in Vermont, but the macro place is really our place in humanity.
It's where the heart is.
Exactly. Yep.
My first summer, I think, was 2014 or 2015. And we went to a lake not far from here. And I hear about this adaptive sports and Access Sport America coming. And I'm like, what is this thing? We got to the lake. And for the first time, I saw people, like wheelchair users, go on windsurfs.
Right.
Like, what? And it's so great. That's a great example of all of the things that we work out here. It's like, it's not because you're a wheelchair user that you're not going to get on a windsurf, or it's not because it's difficult for you to walk up steps that you're not going to go on a roller coaster and like have your whole body shake. We find a way to make pretty much everything work.
Yes, exactly. I often think of my friend Elizabeth, who's a woman out in Los Angeles at the programs out there, who actually just recently passed away in October. But she was a woman with Down syndrome and had multiple medical complications as well. And her first couple of times at the camp, I was her one-on-one. So we have a model where people provide one-on-one care. So people are paired up. So someone with a disability is paired with someone without a disability to provide care. And also we have people with disabilities that provide care. It's a continuum. It's not a binary, but everyone has a one-on-one to make sure that they have all their needs supported. And so I was working with Elizabeth, and she had a very severe speech impediment. And so one rest hour after lunch, she wanted to tell me something that I could not understand. We kept at it, and again, I'm pretty experienced. I have this clinical career, and I've been working the camps since 2000, but I couldn't get it. And I said, you know what, Elizabeth, like maybe we'll call your mom after, can you point to it? We were using all our strategies, and I think we got to like 40 minutes, and she's really persisting. And then somehow we finally broke through that she wanted to tell me the words Beverly Hills Chihuahua DVD, which I did not even know they made a DVD called Beverly Hills Chihuahua. And for her to pronounce the word Chihuahua was probably the hardest word you've ever pronounced. And it was such a celebration when we got through to that. And we were hugging, and we only had 10 minutes of rest, but I think we snuggled, and, we got through it. And I think it's a good story to emphasize what you're saying is that the way that we got through that and the way that I got through that is that I just hold in my heart, in my energetic space, that the problem is that something isn't being understood. The problem is not that Elizabeth cannot say that. And it's a stance of neutrality in a way that allows for the possibility. When I just hold that steady, okay, something is not being communicated, and we stick with that. And sometimes you don't get to Beverly Hills Chihuahua. Sometimes you say, let's try again later, or let's wait till your sister comes. She might be able to help me, That really is what's different about this model and this building of the shared history, is that we hold each other in this space of wholeness. And so we can say, all right, Ronnie, you want to windsurf? That takes a lot of resources and creativity for Ronnie, again, the man with the brain injury we spoke about, to windsurf.
He's tall and he's heavy.
Yeah, for people to understand, Ronnie had a brain injury when he was in his 20s, early 20s, and now he's well into his 30s, and he's very tall. He's like 6'2", and has limited strength in his legs. So it's hard for him to transfer from his wheelchair one place to the other. And because he's so tall, it's hard to transfer, and limited strength in his legs or his arms. So he can sit and use his arms, but he also just has one arm that's stronger than the other, and one that's pretty tight and has some spasticity. So for Ronnie to windsurf takes incredible resources and creativity and a lot of people power. That is also what we have at Zeno, is tons of people, and people that just arrive like you did and get right to the lake. And it's also, we don't spend a lot of time kind of explaining why Ronnie gets a chance to windsurf, and why, we do it, and we do it together, and we do it with Ronnie collaborating, And let me tell you, when you learn how to windsurf, you fall off into the lake many times, because windsurfing is very hard to balance, And so it really creates also, we call it, the dignity of risk for Ronnie to get a chance to fall flat on his face in the lake, just like many people that are learning to windsurf. The windsurfing is a pretty dynamic thing, because the group that we work with, Access Board America, has made adaptive windsurfers that are chairs bolted onto two boards that are connected with pipes. It's a hard thing to explain on a podcast, but he can sit. We can transfer him up and over, but that means transferring to a double windsurfer that's in the lake that's moving, And so we just use like 5 or 6 people and strap on his life jacket really tight, and to get to participate in something like that is, again, it feeds the spirit, and it's fun, and it's collaborative, and you fall in the lake. And then at the end of the day, when you go to dinner, you were like, remember when I took that spill? And you laugh about it and pass the mashed potatoes. That's what we all want to do, is be in these experiences and push ourselves and have it be real, and get to places that feel deep, and then come back to share about it.
And there's not only these physical experiences, like to get somewhere, there's also all the conversations. I'm thinking about Jacob, for example, who wants people to be healthy, and he wants to help people go through their health check. And so he trains people to be gentle towards each other, to check their eyes and their ears. And that's a way for him to kind of like enter the group, make sure that everybody's healthy, and then We can go on, and it's so interesting, like, because you get to play games all the time. It's like a theater.
Oh, people are so quirky. That's like, again, like you can't have a wrong human. People at Zeno are so wonderfully diverse, and you couldn't, I mean, I always say like there's not a bad seat on the bus. I'm also the director, so I'm bossing people around all day, which I love to do. But it is really true. People say, oh, I wanted to sit next to Maria, and I'll say, you know what? There is not a bad seat on this bus, because I guarantee either you're going to fall asleep and take a nap because we're so tired, or you're going to get into a conversation that you couldn't have dreamed of, because it's that diverse. And it really is kind of a celebration of the everyday, because it's if you and I went to get ice cream, for example, we would have a nice time and we would have a chat and ice cream would be delicious. But if you go with 70 people that are the most diverse friends that you have, going to ice cream becomes a full adventure. It takes like about 4 hours, first of all. And then you can't imagine the adventures it takes when people walk differently and eat differently, and it is theater. It is a very creative approach to life, and again, that diversity breeds that. The Zeno philosophy has some basic principles, and we've touched on many of them just organically through the conversation. But one is that everyone contributes, and that goes from washing the dishes or helping to edit the play or sweeping your cabin or providing direct care to someone with a disability, feeding, bathing. Also that we come back year after year so that people can build a shared history and build, it's a lifelong friendship model. So that really is the outcome we're going for, is friendship, which is, it's not a capitalist goal. We're kind of changing what the goals are, what the metrics are. And we're saying that we're prioritizing friendship. And when it's so diverse, again, it takes resources and creativity, but what blooms is so incredible. The third core principle is that nobody pays to come and nobody gets paid to partake or to help or support. And this is really huge and also different and anti-capitalist, because there is no social hierarchy when you eliminate money, and people with disabilities are asked to pay extra for everything. And the majority of people with disabilities spend the majority of their time with family or people that are paid to spend time with them, which is so important. Respite care is such an important part of life and of the reality, but it is a little bit different than to spend time with people that aren't paid to build friendships in an authentic, to have the chance, to have the opportunity to build friendships with someone that isn't paid. The level of respect, the level of what someone expects and the give and take has a different chance, has a different opportunity. So that's another core principle. And it's so fundamental to Zeno that nobody gets paid and no one pays. Everyone's a volunteer, that we sometimes forget that's so like embedded in our hearts and how we care for each other and how we greet each other, and that it's important to talk about, because we're taking away that barrier for people to come, one, financially, and then two, we're taking away that barrier from the relationships that are being built. And we're able to do that because we spend all of our time outside of camp raising money. It is a nonprofit, so we raise money all year long to support the camps. But our overhead is also very manageable because all the care is provided by volunteers and everyone contributes. The last core principle, the fourth, is that we always have, we call it focused investment. We always have a project. We always have like a unifying project at each camp. And this is one, to create a container for all that potential we were talking about, but to create a space for everyone to rise up into. So in the summer, we make a play, an original musical, and that is that container that actualizes the potential of the group. At our group that we work with chronic illness, they do a beautiful story, moth-inspired story night, where people work all week on their stories and then share it in this very cool format. So every group has a project or a unifying theme, to something that we build or create together.
So you have camps throughout the year that aren't all related to disability. You said that there's...
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so important. Yep. From that philosophy that we just shared about, we expanded it to other groups that were marginalized. And that kind of happened organically. People reached out to us and we built the facility, and it just sort of grew. But we now work all throughout the year. There's 12 retreats throughout the year, and other groups that have barriers to community. That's kind of the way we're explaining it. So people with brain injury, we had a special group that was focused on that, because that group also is an acquired disability. So it's a particular set of challenges. And often at that camp, people would come with a caregiver or with a family member, which was different to most, camps. We also have a couple groups with veterans to build community after being of service and then being home. All the groups name it themselves. That one's called the Welcome Home Retreat, because I had learned as an ally in that group that people often say thank you for your service to veterans, but they really prefer people to say welcome home, because to be in the service, you're doing this very core work to protect the people, but you're also separated. And so when you say welcome home, it's like it's kind of a reintegration of them as a human. So the welcome home retreat with the veterans, and then the chronic illness group, they named it the Spoonie Collective, which is a group of people with, they sort of say, invisible disabilities: Lyme disease, lupus, MS, depression, and disabilities that you may not, if you saw someone on the street, know that they have a disability, but it has very big impacts on their life and everything that they do and wish to do. And the Spoonie Collective is after a system of cataloging their energy. They say, like, when they wake up in the morning, how many spoons that they have. Like, oh, I spent my spoon doing a podcast with Léa, I'm too tired to go out to dinner. Or they use it as a kind of a term, a colloquial term in the group about how much energy you have. And sometimes you wake up with 0 spoons, and all day long, you don't have any. So it's a really, really incredible group. We're doing some new groups this coming up with special ed high school classes, which is, again, in the disability model, but very much looking forward to that as well. And younger, yep. And again, offering our facility, our camp, to groups that kind of already have a culture. They're going to come with their staff and with their classroom culture, so we can just offer a resource and kind of partner and give them a chance for a field trip experience that all people would like to have, to go on a trip with your group. And I think many special ed high school classes don't have a lot of places saying, hey, we'd love to offer a field trip. It's sort of the opposite. Like, I'm not sure if your group can stay here. What do you need? Again, it's that model. And so we're saying we would love to create that. And that would be easy for us, in fact. And the last group that we worked with, we're now calling it the affinity camps, is young adults with cancer, people that have been affected by cancer or currently in cancer. And that also has barriers to community with all the health challenges and the cycles of that. And so that also has been a very meaningful group to be part of and to just be an ally and to learn from. And we use those same Zeno core principles on repeat. We come back year after year. Nobody pays to come. Everyone contributes, and we all work on a unifying project.
I think there's another thing that is that everybody calls each other friends. There's no helper or counselor or like helped person or camper. It's like everybody is friends and there's no distinction. I think that's really, really important, especially in environments of care. Often the person who cares for can have an ascendant position, like they decide. And what I thought was also really magical here is that it's not because you help or you're helped that you're not equal. And that in life doesn't always take place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the language is so important, and the language is huge, and the language is evolving, as we all evolve. And I think when we first started at the camp on the vineyard, we did use the terms camper and counselor, and that was just the common terms. And so since Zeno has been around, we have evolved that languaging, and we have done away with camper and counselor. And that first summer, it felt a little awkward for some people, kept saying counselor. But there is a, like you're saying, there's a hierarchy in that. As the counselor, I'm bringing something more, or I'm bringing something higher to the camper, and because at Zeno, the majority are adults. So often the camper, the person with the disability, has been coming in this model for 30 years. And the counselor, who is you arriving in 2014, it's your first time. So they're bringing a lot more knowledge. There's many different situations. But very quickly, we transitioned that language. It was so much more aligned to take away camper and counselor that it clicked. And now it almost feels like saying camper and counselor feels kind of dirty. It feels like kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We very much, and we have to tell people that all the time, because that is the common thing. And camper often also is associated with somebody that's younger. And often people say, when we run a program for people with disabilities, people think children. I think the fundamental piece is that in general, which, can be hard to talk about, people with disabilities are valued less. And that is something at Zeno, we are showing a model where that is not true, like you're saying. Your value is not dependent on care being provided or anything like that. We are saying that every single person is valuable. And then what do you have to bring, And so we do not use the term camper and counselor. Yeah, we use people with disabilities, and we use the term safety crew for non-disabled volunteers. And we often just use the non-disabled crew. We need to be pragmatic and speak honestly about what everyone's doing so that we can be safe and move the group along. But it's a very important piece of the ethos of Zeno, how we treat each other, is the languaging. Often people that come to Zeno also carry that with them into their lives. So if you have a disability and you leave Zeno, you carry that you can be in a respectful, reciprocal friendship, and you start to train other people in your lives to be friends, and treat people in a way. And for the non-disabled crew, I remember my friend Finn was working. She's a young professional, and after college, working at a program for people with autism during the day. And she found, after working there for a little bit, that it was not a friendship model. It wasn't a respectful model. It was a model that had a lot of hierarchy, where the people that were non-disabled were very much above, and providing, as you said, all the ideas for activities and providing all the activities of all the supports that need to happen. And she said that she sort of tried to influence and communicate about ways that it could feel more aligned and true to her, collaborative, exactly. And she ended up deciding to leave that place of work and work at a different place. She went to Planned Parenthood. But I think that's a good example of when we get treated in this way, and when we treat each other in this way, we start to treat and train other people in our lives, and want to be in relationships that are that way. One very different thing about when you came is that you also came with your brother, and that we have had some siblings come to Zeno, but not very many. Often siblings take a break when their loved one with a disability is at Zeno and surrounded by friends. That we haven't had a ton of siblings, but often siblings will come for 1 or 2 seasons and then do something different, travel with their family or work in a different experience. But
what kind of feedback have you had from siblings?
No, not really direct feedback. It's just more what I observe. And a big thing for siblings that I've noticed, but you would be the expert here, I would ask you really, is to really have an experience where their sibling is loved by other people, is seen by other people, is appreciated, is pushed, is not coddled to, is just an honest relationship, which, again, back to Ben, there's challenges with getting along with people. There's many challenges, and so, but to have the sibling, to have the loved one really be seen and be loved by other people besides the family is an experience that I sometimes, one family shared that he wasn't sure that anyone else would love his son Josh the way that he did, and his wife and his daughter, and that was something he almost was afraid to kind of speak out loud, because that was not his wish for Josh to not have people that loved him, but he just didn't know what that would look like. He wasn't sure. And so when he came to Zeno, and Josh came for many years and still comes, that's something that opened in him and opened in their family that Josh was loved, and Josh had friends, and Josh loves to hang out and do all those things.
It's also quite magical to see that sometimes people who aren't family members know better than us. I've come to realize that with Anton sometimes. So he's been coming for 6 years and I've been coming for 8 years. And sometimes he doesn't need me. He doesn't want me.
Right.
And
right.
I'm clearly not the one who knows how to deal with what he's going through, and he sometimes gets emotionally overwhelmed and he cries a lot, or he doesn't want to be there. And I'm coming from, sometimes, just because I'm a sister, a position of authority and kind of please behave,
Right.
I want him to be
successful.
Yeah.
And
I want people to think that he's wonderful and flawless, but nobody's flawless,
Right.
And I've always learned how to kind of wish that nobody would notice that sometimes he behaves in certain ways, but obviously he does, and he's himself, and it's great.
Right.
But we also learn too much that we're supposed to fit in a mold that's just not realistic.
Yeah.
And I remember it when I came here also. So I grew up with an older brother who has a disability. So one would think that I know about disability, but no, I know about my story. I know about our story and our experience.
Right.
I didn't know anything about this world. And that's what I found so incredibly passionate and enlightening and uplifting. And I was like, what a world, and what an interesting more than interesting. I was just like, oh, that's what life is really about, like
Yeah.
where are all these people? It's just, yeah, it's so interesting to compare perspectives. And that's what
Yeah.
this project is about. It's really about like comparing.
Totally. And it makes me think of two things. One, the first thing is that we just also are different with our friends, right? We're different with our friends and our family. And that's a baseline common principle about humanity. And again, when you talk about the disability community, that's kind of a very progressive thing that, yeah, Anton does different things with his friends than he does at home. And everyone in the group does different things because it's hanging out with your friends. And that starts with the care, Again, back to my friend Ron, he keeps coming up, but when he got there, he wanted to do 4 types of mouthwash because in his group home where he lives, that's the main time he was getting social contact was during his hygiene. So, and he got to camp and we said, Ronnie, we can't do 4 mouthwashes. Like, first of all, we don't got the time. We got to get to the pond, But there was some things are different. Things are different because it is a friendship model, and there's a liberation in some of that, and there's a change of perspective and now, all these years down the road, I don't even think Ronnie brings his mouthwash anymore. But I think, or people that say, they have trouble falling asleep or this and that. Some of the issues are not issues in the group because they're so motivated by the fun. They're so compelled to be part of the group, to make it to the activity, to contribute, that we naturally all kind of just elevate and we naturally get like a little tiny bit more independent. Again, it's those like teeny tiny steps of getting a little more independent. And I remember Anton, who, we have a big culture at Zeno where we sit and listen to each other, tell stories, especially at dinner. And it's hard for Anton to sit and to listen. And little by little, he would walk out and then walk back in and sit down. And I remember one year I gave him a yellow chair. I don't know where the yellow chair went, but I would just invite him back to the yellow chair. And he was sitting longer because he was making friendships and that was motivating. And that's not something you can tell someone. You can't say, Anton, I think you should learn to sit more. That's not how it works. But when it's motivated from that heart place, from the friendship, people do different things. Oh, Maria didn't eat this or that. And yeah, or soda. That's a great one. Like, we don't have any soda at the camp just because we don't have any soda. And I can't believe they went a whole month without drinking soda. And it's like the whole group's just drinking water and coffee. And so, great, here we are, So I think that's, again, a very common thing about just being able to spend time with friends, getting that change of pace from the family and from all your care providers, and also a break for them. I think that was always a very important part of the camp, is that families and care providers can take a vacation too. We need to spread the work and the responsibility and the joys of caring and being in life and being in collaboration with the disabled, across boundaries.
How do you think that model, I agree, like it shouldn't be only families. How do you think that this could spread?
Well, I think, in a big sense, in that macro sense, again, it's back to a culture where people are valued less because of disability. I think that is where the real core is. So you also sharing, like, is Anton going to act in a way that I feel embarrassed, or I feel, that I don't want him to know that he has flaws, which is so true.
But I react like that because the way of the
way society is. So
yeah.
Society is creating a kind of place where disability is not widely embraced and celebrated. So I think that is the real big picture thing of how we start to chip away at this, is that we start to have experiences for people that are not what they've known. That's not a one-sided view of deficit and a one-sided view of what you can't do and a one-sided view of what's going to be missing and what's going to bring everybody down and what's going to pull from the system, And again, not sugarcoating any of the disability experience. I am not disabled myself, but to start to have other perspectives shown, to hear from people with disabilities about their experience and about their challenges and about their celebrations, and to have an attitude of openness and an attitude of, we can learn together and take steps, and what do you need? And I think a bigger vision would be, disability is about 25% of the population in the US. I don't know the statistics for France, but my guess would be similar. And what if, 25% of all our friends were disabled? And what if 25% of the people that I saw at the library had disabilities? And what if 25% of the people at my work had disabilities? Because that is the truth of life. And the reason it's not there is that there's barriers for people to be out and in community and in those places. So,
and the system is so built on time efficiency and money. It's like, how profitable can you be to the
Exactly.
community in a financial way?
Right. We need to get more creative about that and what people are bringing. That's why Zeno loves the plays, and we've also made films. The film started out as just a real creative project that we love to do and has turned into our primary form of advocacy to kind of show this model, which is to give people a different perspective of disability. And our films star a ton of people with disabilities, but they aren't about the disability. They're not educating in a formal way about disability. They're just showing people with disabilities in all types of characters and storylines. And so I think that's another piece too. Film, we're a culture that understands our humanity a lot, reflects on our humanity through film and through podcasts and through things like this. So I think that's another way that Zeno has tried to take, concrete steps, not just this philosophical space, concrete steps to have better exposure for disability in media, because that can really go a long way. And I think we also make change in the hearts of everyone that comes. People, again, carrying that out into their worlds and all the places that they go.
You also give talks in universities, in libraries. What do you tell people?
Yes, through the movies, actually, we've been doing a lot more talks and a lot more just sort of educational forums. And I always present and talk with disabled advocates. They say nothing about us without us. So every time Zeno is speaking about disability or our programs, we have disabled community members as well, representing and communicating about the experience. But we often teach and talk about what it's like to be a person with a disability in that community. And we teach about disability in film and what the current kind of stereotypes are and what we normally see, and then what's possible in our films. And again, I think the best way to explain it is to do it. That's kind of the Zeno ethos. So to show them a movie and then ask their experience,
Q&As.
The Q&As, yeah. What do you think about disability? What has been your experience? I often find that people also are nervous or fearful or in that deficit type model because they haven't had experiences with people with disabilities, which is nobody's fault. I also think we can't really speak honestly about people's deficits and challenges until we're in a place of valuing everybody. So if you're valued, then we can talk about our deficits and our challenge. But if you're being undervalued, it's painful to talk about the deficits, and it's painful for families as well. So I think that's also what Zeno does well, is that we can be very honest about what people can and can't do. We can be very honest and practical about people's disabilities and as part of their identities, and then go on to the next step of creating wonderful things and having fun and having dance parties and making movies and going for ice cream and doing all the things we want to do, staying up late and dancing and running around in the rain and anything that happens with a big group of fun friends.
This camp is a lot about being together and being physically together. We just went through a pandemic. How did you guys manage that?
Yes, COVID was a humongous challenge across the board. And in our community for people with disabilities, there was a lot of exacerbation in the isolation and lack of access to community and to workplaces. And, a lot of things shut down. And so we very quickly, like within 1 week, decided to meet on Zoom online, and we set up Cyber Camp, which was, we got like whatever the biggest Zoom we could buy. I forget. It was like we were on the email and on the phone of like, okay, we got to just get this up and running kind of as soon as possible. For months, we met every single day from 4 to 5 p.m. for Cyber Camp, and it was a place, again, to have that same core thing of Zeno, which is belonging. Like, my day that had these structures in that were bringing meaning to it, these routines, and now that's completely gone. I know that at 4 p.m. I can go see my friends online and connect and feel a part of, and feel that they would like to see me too. Feel like I matter. You know what I mean? I matter to the group. I add something and I can feel that. So that was our main mechanism. And like I said, we set it up like within a week and then proceeded to just do it daily, Monday through Friday, 4 to 5. And we tried to do a lot of the same activities that we enjoyed. Like we did a prom, we did a big dance online, and cooking. And I taught yoga. I teach yoga at the camp. I taught yoga on Zoom. And yes, arts and crafts, all different things that we could, again, just connect back into that pulse of the friendship and the pulse of the belonging in the community. And it worked, I think it really did give people that thread. They could feel that thread, that pull of connection, despite having a lot of challenges. One amazing Zeno COVID story is that my friend Jackie who's a man with cerebral palsy who lives in a group home outside of Boston. He got COVID pretty early on, and his whole entire group home got COVID. So everyone that had a disability that was at the group home was isolated to their rooms and could not be out in the common room and could not be in the dining room. These are basic places that make us feel our humanity, to go eat your lunch with other people, and so, and a lot of the staff got COVID. It was a dire situation for the group home. As you know, we sort of leveraged our group of friends and the location specific group, so the Boston area group, and we set up a call schedule. So Jackie was getting a call from a Zeno friend, in the morning and the afternoon. And then once a day, someone would go to his window and be a face to go see him. And my friend Debbie, who's just a cook at Zeno, who's a friend of Jackie, she lives nearby and she's retired. So she went many times because she was available. And my friend Ben went, and he also loves Dunkin' Donuts coffee. So they often would bring him a coffee. And so he got to see a friend once a day during this time of very extreme circumstances, and extreme even more because of his disability, because he can't physically take himself to the common room. He was in his room. So Zeno rallies. Zeno has a way to, the friendship is the core thing, and no matter what, find a way to average that friendship. But we used our organizational systems in that case to keep those connections alive, and to keep Jackie really feeling the love and feeling the belonging that was really, really challenged during COVID.
Did you feel like COVID changed some people?
Definitely. And I think people are still integrating that and still growing and shifting from that. I think a lot of the non-disabled group shared, a lot of young people come to Zeno, people in their 20s and people that are college age, because it's a time of life when you have time to volunteer or flexibility in your career. A lot of the non-disabled crew shared about loneliness and feeling a little untethered to a sense of meaning or purpose, or how to be in the world in a way that they could share. And so that was huge. And then people with disabilities, it affected everyone in such unique ways, because everyone is so unique with a disability. But yeah, there was a lot of isolation, and there's already a lot of isolation for disability. Some people work just maybe 1 day a week or 2 days a week. So you take away that, and many people's care providers couldn't come, or so it was very heavy load on the families to provide all the care. Or if someone gets COVID and then they can't go, or they can't have care providers come in. And so again, we just tried to provide that support to the families and to people that we're here and we love you no matter what. And we're rooting for you. We see that this is a hard time, and we're here too, So that first summer back, when we first came back to COVID, we had kind of a little bit of a different schedule. Like, we didn't go out in the community as much. Normally we go to concerts and many movies, and we actually really like to be in the mix with the group. We're very boisterous, and we love to be at any community event. We can go to fairs and you name it. And we didn't do any of that because of the COVID risk, but nobody cared. Everyone was just happy to be together. It was like, that was it. That was the top thing, to be with my friends and be together.
You live here with your family, with your children. How do you feel that they relate or don't relate to everything that you've created here?
Yes, I have 3 children, 3 boys, ages 5 and 9 and 12, and had them all since we've been here. We've been here 14 years. So it's been really wonderful and interesting to watch them kind of grow up through the model of Zeno, something that I came to as a 19-year-old and then started to integrate into my being, but for them, it's actually totally normal. Everyone that comes to Zeno is totally normal, because people come back year after year, so they see and have grown up around all these folks with and without disabilities. And some people want to hug them and it's too firm, and some people, they like to hug. And again, we're very practical about it. We teach them that they can interact in an authentic, honest way with everyone down there, and they love to be part of it. It's so fun. They can feel that too. So again, it comes back to the exposure piece. They have just grown up around these diverse groups, and they have absolutely no judgment about disability. It's really just interest and curiosity. Kids are such natural, like, scientists. They're just like, oh, they walk in that way. And I couldn't understand when Diana was talking, but then she had a computer. What does she use the computer for? Just these questions that are natural and real, and we want to be in those spaces to actually build relationships. So it's totally fun. And it's a privilege to be down there. Our house is right next door to the camp and the campus. So we have kind of our own zone, but they come down and they have to follow the rules too. When they're down there, they have to contribute. So my oldest son, Truman, who's 12, just last summer was helping out in a more formal capacity. And my friend Steve, who's normally uses loft-strand crutches to walk, was in a wheelchair because his foot was a little sore. And I had to stay in the barn and help somebody. And so I asked Truman if he would help push Steve back to the cabin. And Steve was ready to go take a nap. And Steve said, Truman, would you help? And he did. And so that was kind of the first moment where Truman helped in that way. But it was a very natural extension of Truman's relationship with Steve to then support him, because that's an area where there's a surplus, right? That's very easy for Truman to do with his body. And that's an area where Steve needs help. So I think it also is, again, creating the culture and the environment where needing help or needing support or doing something differently doesn't mean that you're less than.
When I invited you to speak on this podcast, did you think about specific subjects that you wanted to bring up?
I didn't actually. I just felt excited. I love to speak about camp and Zeno and the people and go to that micro place, these like small moments of care and of silliness or whatever's happening, and then zoom like way back out to the macro. Talking about disability or zooming in on disability is a very beneficial way to think about humanity because it's very concrete. You would say someone is less than someone else because the arm doesn't work, or because there's outbursts when something is simple, doesn't go the way. It's very concrete. And so we get a chance to really look at, hey, I was thinking that I was valuing that person differently than that other person. But it really is what we need to just do across the board. It really is just our natural humanity, I think, to be of service to each other and to honor each one of us. So I just felt excited to be a part of it and to be sharing my story, my perspective that has been so enriched by this community. Again, I think at 19, my spirit felt magnetized to the creativity and to the culture of belonging, that belonging really is a human right. And how do we support people to belong? And then along that way, we belong ourselves. It's also collaborative. It's also reciprocal. That I couldn't think of a different job to do that was more dynamic if I tried, it just kept pulling me along. I think also I find with disability that I have been doing this for 22 years. I'm also continuing to learn and grow and see things in a deeper and different way all the time. Because it is people, and because we're working with potential that not everyone sees. It's just an ever unfolding kind of universe in these relationships. I love to be in the challenge and the complexities of that. It's super fun.
Do you have a final word?
I guess my final word would be, a sort of a wish. My wish is for Zeno to be normal, like my children see, for Zeno not to be needed, right? For there to be a place in every community where people with disabilities could go, and people that have any barriers to community could go to build friendships and to contribute, and that people are just more integrated in everyday life, like we said, that we don't need specialized places. Although I think we still want the places because we still want to have fun and do all the activities and make the plays. So culturally, there's that we shifted the paradigm about any person being valued less than another person, and that we get to have the camp and the yearly retreat for fun and friendship building. And when we see the world in this way, we all benefit. We all get to a deeper level. I know that people have to experience it to get that. It's not something that you can tell. And I think your experience as a sibling has such a deep impact on your life and your perspective in everything that you do. And so I want everyone's perspective to just be able to be deepened in this way.
And also, I feel like if shop owners or like restaurant owners or different places thought like that, much more teams would include a person who has a disability, whichever, like physical, intellectual. Like, I feel like with this open and kind of like, okay, what can we do approach of life and approach of a person, there would be many more people with disabilities who could work. The workforce would be definitely enriched. There would be new jobs, a new really economy could be possible, since that is kind of the core subject in the end. It's like time and money, really.
Right.
Sadly, but I feel that if everybody had that kind of, okay, let's work it out and let's see what's possible, the world would be much more diverse and rich, and everybody would have a place exactly like they should,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it would be just more reflective of
of the reality
of what
the
it is.
population.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
It's really
very
been
much.
a pleasure.
You've been listening to Out of Sync, exploring life through disability, one story at a time. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Transcripts are available on YouTube, and French language stories on Décalé, Decales. I'm Léa Hirschfeld. Thanks for listening.